That call was never supposed to matter. That's how every major shift begins. Quiet, routine, almost forgettable. Just another media appearance, just another chair at a desk, just another network segment that comes and goes. But by the end of that night, multiple front offices were asking the exact same question. How did this happen without anyone seeing it coming? Because the moment the broadcast went live, something felt different. The set looked normal. The lights were the same. The NBA highlights played like they always do. And then the host said her name, Caitlin Clark. Not as a guest, not as a feature, not as the rookie people are debating, but as an analyst, positioned like she belonged there. Like she had always belonged there. And for a few seconds, the silence inside league circles said everything, because everyone watching understood the same truth at once. This wasn't a visit, it was a crossover. She wasn't stepping into the spotlight, she was stepping onto a larger stage, and suddenly the WNBA didn't feel like the biggest room anymore. What fans didn't see was what happened before the cameras even rolled. Group chats were already exploding. Executives, agents, staffers, PR teams all buzzing with the same disbelief. Is this real? Since when? Who signed off on it? Because for years, there was an unspoken rule about how far a player could rise before the league tried to keep things contained. And in that moment, that rule started breaking.
Announced that Caitlin Clark will join their coverage for Sunday Night Basketball beginning this weekend for the Lakers versus the Knicks at Madison Square Garden. This is the WNBA superstar's debut as an NBA analyst, and NBC has absolutely been killing it. First they had MJ, which, by the way, that deal was insane. He got paid $40 million, and I literally think he sat down for an hour. NBC knows how to find the cream of the crop talent, and I just loved what the executive producer for NBC Sports said. This is Sam Flood. He said there's no more iconic figure in basketball in the women's game right now, or the game in general. So we said, let's have a bigger conversation. And it's just so crazy that it feels like every other sport will just come out and say what it is besides the WNBA. The NBA is not scared to acknowledge that there's no more iconic figure in basketball. Not just the women's game, but possibly the game in general than Caitlin Clark. But we would not hear that in the WNBA space. We wouldn't hear that from WNBA media, but the NBA media and the NBA and the league itself is not scared to say it. Like we've seen it when Caitlin does golf events. It just seems like every league but her own is not scared to say the truth. But
WNBA stars were always expected to stay in their lane. The NBA had its world, its money, its spotlight, and the WNBA had theirs. Separate audiences, separate levels of attention, separate rules. You weren't supposed to cross over like that. Not this directly, not this confidently. But nobody ever handed Caitlin Clark that memo, or maybe she saw it and ignored it. While other players were still fighting for minutes, fighting for endorsements, fighting for a microphone, she quietly walked onto one of the most watched basketball broadcasts in the country and took her seat like it was the most normal thing in the world. And the unsettling part wasn't that she showed up, it was that she didn't look nervous. She didn't look out of place. She looked comfortable, almost too comfortable. She started breaking down plays, calling out defensive coverages, speaking with the calm authority of a veteran voice, not a rookie guest. And that's when the real shift began. The ratings didn't dip, they climbed. The clips didn't disappear, they spread. Her segments weren't being shared as a novelty. People weren't saying, "Oh look, it's that girl from the WNBA." They were saying, "Wait, she's actually really good at this." And that's when it stopped being cute. That's when it became something bigger, something threatening, because hype fades fast, but skill doesn't. And if she's elite on the court and undeniable on national television, then suddenly the conversation changes. Now you don't just have a star player, you have a force the entire basketball world has to deal with.
Really excited to be part of the Basketball Night in America crew this season. Carmelo, Vince, and Tracy are legends of the game, and Maria is a true professional. It will be really fun to join them a few times this season. And then from NBC, Caitlin is one of the most captivating players and dynamic scorers in basketball. We're excited to have Caitlin join Hall of Famers Melo, Vince, Tracy, and Reggie in New York for the launch of Sunday Night Basketball. Sunday Night Basketball being what they're calling the actual games, and another game she'll call is in March. or she'll be a part, she's not calling the game, she'll be a part of the broadcast for, is Oklahoma City and the Knicks.
Caitlin Clark has something leagues can't manufacture. She has personality. She has influence. And influence is the one currency no organization can ever fully control. Inside WNBA offices, insiders say the mood didn't turn into celebration or pride, it turned into concern. Real concern. Because for decades, the league has tried to build stars carefully, slowly, safely, one marketing campaign at a time. But Caitlin didn't wait for permission. She didn't wait for a league-approved rollout. She didn't wait for someone to crown her. She elevated herself, and she did it on a platform the league doesn't even own. That's what stung the most. Because when a player grows outside the system stops owning the spotlight. And ownership of attention is everything. Veterans were the first to notice the shift. Suddenly, reporters weren't leading with last night's box score. They weren't asking about team chemistry or defensive rotations. They were asking about her. Did you see Clark on NBC? What do you think about her doing NBA coverage? Is she becoming the face of basketball? And imagine what that feels like if you've spent 10 years grinding through empty arenas, long flights, small paychecks, building the league brick by brick, only for a 22-year-old to arrive and instantly sit under the brightest lights in the sport before you even land a sneaker deal. That doesn't feel inspiring. That feels threatening. Because nobody likes feeling replaceable. And that's when the whispers started.
Why is Caitlin Clark not signed to Clutch? I feel like if Caitlin Clark was signed to Clutch Sports, which, by the way, is LeBron James' agency, Rich Paul works there. They have a lot of power in the NBA space. Like, if Caitlin Clark was signed to Clutch, I feel like this CBA would have been done by now. And I don't know, maybe I'm speculating here, but if you see your client who is this massive superstar, like, a deal has to get done. I feel like where is Rich Paul? Where is LeBron? LeBron's a huge fan of Caitlin Clark. I feel like he would like Caitlin to be signed with Clutch. And they do have Asia Wilson. Maybe Rich Paul can step in and have Asia's back and get this thing done. Everybody loses if there is not a WNBA season next year. Like, yes, they are still mega superstars and they will still be able to do commercials and all of these things. But I wish that she was kind of with a dog agent like Clutch. Somebody who just goes to war for their clients. And I feel like that would have been a perfect pairing. I also think that the Nike deal, like, there's no way Clutch would have just signed off on a $24 million 8-year deal with Nike for a player like Caitlin Clark. I feel like there's just no way. So I don't know what happened. I don't know if she signed with her agent early on, but can we start a petition to get her to Clutch? Because I feel like some things would be moved.
She was everywhere. And that's when the murmurs started to grow. This is too much. It's turning into the Caitlin show. But whispers like that don't come from confidence. They come from fear. Because the numbers were undeniable. The games she played sold out faster. Ticket prices surged. Social media lit up like never before. And now, networks outside the league weren't just featuring her, they wanted her voice. Not the league's version of her. That's when the entire power dynamic shifted. Suddenly the question wasn't, how does Caitlin help grow the WNBA? It became, what happens if she doesn't need us? And that is the most terrifying thought any organization can face. Because the moment one player becomes bigger than the brand, control starts slipping. Then something happened that nobody expected. Other players began backing her. Quietly at first, private texts, locker room conversations, small moments of respect behind the scenes. But eventually, it spilled into public view. Sophie Cunningham didn't criticize. She didn't throw shade. She didn't demand humility. She praised her. Said she earned it. Said it was good for women's basketball. And somehow, that support was louder than any attack. Because when even competitors admit you're different, the debate is finished. It's not hype anymore. It's reality.
Clark, the Indiana Fever star with an enormous following within the game, is joining the network's pregame coverage for its debut of Sunday Night Basketball this weekend when the Los Angeles Lakers play the New York Knicks at Madison Square Garden. The debut. They picked her to kick it off. Not, yeah, it'll do a couple weeks and then you'll come in. No. We need you to launch this thing, dude. We need you to kick this off. See? And if you remember, Peacock, NBC.
It's reality. And once it became undeniable, the league couldn't brush it off anymore. They couldn't call it a temporary wave or pretend it would pass, because even her rivals were admitting the truth. She was changing the entire landscape. That's when the uncomfortable questions started circulating in executive offices. What happens when networks start reaching out to her directly instead of going through the league? What happens when sponsors follow her name instead of the jersey? What happens when young fans tune in for Caitlin Clark, not for the logo on the screen? Because loyalty to a league is fragile, but loyalty to a superstar is unstoppable, and history has proven that over and over again. Caitlin was becoming that kind of figure, not the kind you can design in a boardroom, not the kind you can manufacture with marketing, but the kind who simply takes over. Meanwhile, the broadcasts continued, and with every appearance she looked more comfortable, more confident, more natural, like she'd belonged there all along. Fans didn't see politics or boundaries, they just saw talent. But behind closed doors, boundaries were everything. Because once one player crosses over like this, others start wondering, if she can do it, why can't I? And that's how systems begin to crack. One person stops asking permission, and suddenly everyone else follows. The league stops being the gatekeeper and becomes just another stop along the way. And insiders say that's what truly rattled them most. Not that she was thriving, but that she was thriving without needing them. She wasn't waiting for approval, a marketing plan, or validation. NBC validated her. The NBA audience validated her. Millions validated her. And once you reach that level, you stop feeling dependent. You start understanding something dangerous. You have leverage. And leverage changes everything. Because now, when contracts come up, when negotiations happen, when media opportunities arise, she isn't pleading, she's deciding. That's a different kind of power, and organizations hate when players have options. So the tension grew, the smiles became rehearsed, the praise sounded forced, because deep down everyone understood what this really was. This wasn't just a player joining a TV desk. This was the moment Caitlin Clark stepped out of the league's shadow and created her own. And once that shadow becomes bigger than the league itself, there's no undoing it. Now every move she makes carries more weight, every deal feels louder, every appearance feels like a statement, not just about her.
Figure in basketball, in women's game right now, or the game in general, about Caitlin Clark. In the game in general, lads, all I gotta say is that that is not something that the WNBA would be happy with. We saw it. The WNBPA said that Alyssa Thomas was the reason why people are watching. And by the way, it's not even, people are like, oh, it was the finals about Alyssa Thomas. No. They literally said it wasn't just the playoffs, but our regular season broke records as fans went to watch Alyssa Thomas. Like, that is a statement. And it's a statement the WNBPA had put out. I have to say that is a statement that they had put out to say that fans came to watch Alyssa Thomas instead of Caitlin Clark or Angel Reese. Even if you wanted to say Angel Reese, it is what it is. I think you're allowed to say Paige Beckers if you are, because I'm pretty sure.
This isn't just about what happens next for Caitlin Clark. It's about what happens next for the entire sport, because maybe this was never only her story. Maybe this is the beginning of something much bigger. A shift where players aren't confined to one lane, where talent can't be boxed in, where the spotlight isn't rationed out by league offices or controlled by old systems. Maybe this was the moment the walls quietly started to collapse. And that's why the silence behind the scenes felt so heavy, because nobody wanted to say it out loud, but everyone was thinking the exact same thing. If one NBC deal created this much tension, what happens when the next opportunity arrives? What happens when another door opens? What happens when she grows even larger than she already is? Because right now, she isn't chasing attention. Attention is chasing her. And when that happens, you stop being just a player. You stop being just a rookie. You stop being just a headline. You become a force. And forces don't ask permission. They reshape everything in front of them. Which means this probably isn't the peak. This might only be the start. And if the league already feels uneasy now, they're not prepared for what comes later. Because Caitlin Clark didn't just join NBC. She stepped across a line no one else dared to cross. And the most unsettling part is how effortless she made it look, like it was always inevitable, like the system was never built big enough to contain her. And once fans understand that, once players understand that, once networks understand there's no putting this back in the bottle, control disappears. The walls come down. And for the first time, it doesn't feel like the league is shaping the future of women's basketball anymore. It feels like she is. And that's the moment everything changes. She was everywhere. And that's when the murmurs started to grow. This is too much. It's turning into the Caitlin show. But whispers like that don't come from confidence. They come from fear. Because the numbers were undeniable. The games she played sold out faster. Ticket prices surged. Social media lit up like never before. And now, networks outside the league weren't just featuring her, they wanted her voice. Not the league's version of her. That's when the entire power dynamic shifted. Suddenly the question wasn't, how does Caitlin help grow the WNBA? It became, what happens if she doesn't need us? And that is the most terrifying thought any organization can face. Because the moment one player becomes bigger than the brand, control starts slipping. Then something happened that nobody expected. Other players began backing her. Quietly at first, private texts, locker room conversations, small moments of respect behind the scenes. But eventually, it spilled into public view. Sophie Cunningham didn't criticize. She didn't throw shade. She didn't demand humility. She praised her. Said she earned it. Said it was good for women's basketball. And somehow, that support was louder than any attack. Because when even competitors admit you're different, the debate is finished. It's not hype anymore. It's reality.